Elias Rourke had never been meant to stand inside a royal chamber. 3 hours earlier, he'd been supervising cargo drones on Dock Ring C, counting crates, verifying manifests, arguing with an AI that insisted 47 units of medical gel counted as approximately 50. It was the kind of work that rewarded precision and punished imagination. The kind of work that kept the universe orderly, predictable, safe. Then the summons came. Not urgent, not dramatic, just inevitable. Lieutenant Rourke, the message had said, neutral and polite. You will accompany the Terran delegation to the Obsidian Court as acting liaison. Please report immediately. Liaison. Elias had laughed out loud at that. He wasn't a diplomat. He wasn't even particularly social. He specialized in logistics, in systems that behaved according to rules. Queens did not behave according to rules. Now he stood before doors taller than starship hangars, their surface flowing like frozen shadow, veins of dim, violet light pulsing beneath a black sheen that refused to stay still. The air itself felt different here, thicker, charged, as if reality had been folded and pressed too many times. Something inside his chest tightened. Not fear, not excitement, recognition. Elias frowned, pressing a hand briefly to his sternum as if that might settle the sensation. It didn't. The feeling had been growing since the moment their ship entered Calith space, a low, persistent hum beneath his thoughts, like a memory trying to surface without permission. You're pale, Ambassador Hale muttered beside him, straightening her formal jacket. Try not to faint. That would be diplomatically inconvenient. I don't faint, Elias said automatically. The doors began to open. Silence rolled outward, heavy and absolute. The Obsidian Court revealed itself in slow motion, vast, vertical, impossibly elegant. Pillars rose like crystallized time, layered with inscriptions so old his translator hesitated before assigning meaning. Light bent strangely here, refracting through angles that made his eyes ache if he focused too long. Delegations from dozens of systems stood arranged in concentric arcs, ancient species, warlike ones, beings who had rewritten their own biology centuries before humans had learned faster than light travel. Humans were placed at the edge, where they belonged. Elias moved to his assigned marker, posture carefully neutral, eyes forward. He told himself to breathe, to think about manifests, about numbers, about anything other than the growing certainty that something in this room knew him. Then he felt her, not saw, felt. The sensation struck like a sudden gravitational shift, his balance faltering, breath catching as if the air itself had changed density. His neural implants spiked, flashing warnings he didn't have time to read before they vanished. The court stilled. Elias looked up. The Empress of Calith stood from her throne. That alone was enough to freeze the chamber. She was tall, taller than any human present, her form wrapped in living fabric that shimmered between midnight blue and deep silver. Her skin glowed faintly, as if lit from beneath, and her elongated ears swept back in a sharp, involuntary motion that no amount of royal discipline could disguise. Her eyes. Elias forgot how to breathe. They were not simply eyes. They were depth, spiral galaxies suspended in flesh, rotating slowly, searching. When they locked onto him, the sensation in his chest exploded into something terrifyingly clear. This is wrong. This is familiar. The Empress swayed. A ripple of shock passed through the court. Guards shifted. Advisors whispered urgently in a language too old and formal for casual translation. Elias became acutely aware of how very small he was, how exposed. The Empress took one step forward, then another. Her gaze never left him. You, she said, her voice calm and trembling beneath it. Human. Elias swallowed. Every protocol screamed at him not to speak unless addressed, not to move unless commanded. His heart hammered so hard it felt like it might fracture his ribs. Yes, Your Majesty, he managed. Her eyes widened. The reaction was instant, visceral. Her hand tightened on the arm of the throne, the material creaking softly under the force of her grip. For a fraction of a second, something like fear crossed her expression. Then something far more dangerous. Hope. You feel it, she said quietly. It was not a question. Elias hesitated, every instinct urging denial. But the truth pressed against him from the inside, undeniable and aching. Yes, he said. I don't understand it, but yes. The Empress descended from the dais. Gasps rippled through the chamber. She stopped only a few steps away, close enough that Elias could feel the warmth radiating from her, close enough that the air between them felt charged, intimate, unstable. Her voice lowered, meant for him alone, and yet somehow heard by everyone. I have waited centuries, she said, to feel this again. Her hand lifted, paused, then gently, impossibly, rested against his chest. The contact sent a shock through him, sharp, electric, and profoundly grounding. The sensation in his chest locked into place, like a key finally turning in a lock he'd never known existed. The Empress exhaled, shaky and relieved. It is you, she whispered. Elias Rourke, logistics officer of the Terran Alliance, stood in the heart of an alien empire older than his species, and knew with terrifying. The moment her hand left his chest, the silence broke, not into sound but into motion. Guards shifted fully into defensive formation. Advisors spoke over one another in urgent, clipped bursts of ancient caliph. Delegates leaned forward, eyes bright with calculation. Whatever had just happened had crossed a line no one present had expected to be crossed today. Elias felt it too. The contact had ended, but the sensation hadn't faded. It lingered beneath his skin, a steady pressure like gravity recalibrated around a new center. His neural implant attempted diagnostics again, failed, and shut itself down with a quiet warning pulse that translated loosely to conditions undefined. The Empress straightened slowly, her composure returning in layers, first her posture, then her expression, then finally the carefully sculpted stillness of absolute authority. But something had changed. Elias could see it in the way her eyes continued to track him even as she addressed the court. This session is suspended, she announced. The reaction was immediate and chaotic. Suspended audiences did not happen, not in the Obsidian Court. Not without catastrophe, war, or death. One of her senior advisors stepped forward despite clearly not wanting to. His ears flicked with controlled alarm. Your Majesty, the protocols. Are mine, she said calmly. The advisor bowed, retreating at once. Her gaze returned to Elias, sharp now, assessing in a different way, not searching but measuring. As if she were recalculating a centuries-old equation with a new variable she had never believed would appear. You will come with me, she said. It was not phrased as an order. It was worse. Elias glanced reflexively toward Ambassador Hale, who looked like she was oscillating between panic and awe. She gave him a tiny, helpless shrug that translated clearly into I have no authority here. Elias began, then stopped. There was no version of this sentence that ended with him remaining where he was. Yes, Your Majesty, he said instead. The Empress turned, her robes flowing behind her like captured starlight, and ascended the dais once more, this time not to the throne but past it, toward a private passage Elias hadn't noticed before. The guards moved aside at a gesture. The court watched in stunned silence as the human liaison followed the Empress of Caliph into a corridor that had not been opened in over 100 years. The doors sealed behind them. Only then did Elias realize his hands were shaking. The corridor was narrow by palace standards, smooth and dark, lit by a faint bioluminescence embedded in the walls. The air felt warmer here, less ceremonial, more personal. The sensation in Elias' chest intensified with every step, no longer just recognition but pull, like proximity mattered on a biological level. The Empress stopped abruptly. Elias nearly walked into her. Up close, the effect of her presence was overwhelming. Not just her height or beauty, though both were impossible to ignore, but the density of her. As if centuries of memory, power, and restraint pressed outward from her skin. She turned. For the first time since entering the court, her expression fractured. You should not exist, she said quietly. The statement was not cruel. It was honest, troubled. Elias swallowed. I get that a lot today. Her eyes flicked, an almost human sign of distraction. This resonance, this echo you carry, it should have faded generations ago. It should have diluted into nothing. I don't even know what it is, Elias said. I don't remember saving anyone. I don't remember anything like what you're implying. I know, she said, and that is what frightens me. She stepped closer. Elias did not retreat. He wasn't sure he could. When the palace fell, she continued, voice low, controlled with effort, everything was fire and collapse. I remember terror. I remember pain. And then, she hesitated, calm, she finished, not mine, someone else's. A presence that refused to panic, hands that moved with certainty, a voice I never heard but felt. Her fingers curled slowly at her side, as if recalling the shape of something long gone. That resonance has haunted me for 347 years, she said. It has guided decisions, tempered my cruelty, stayed my hand when annihilation would have been easier. Her gaze locked onto his, and now it is standing in front of me, wearing a Terran uniform, with no memory of the promise it carries. Elia's chest tightened painfully. What promise? Her jaw set. That someone like you exists, she said. That in the moment everything burns. Compassion can still appear without reason. She reached out again, stopped herself this time. That makes you dangerous, she said softly. Elias blinked. Dangerous. To empires built on fear, she said. To courts built on calculation, to me. The admission hung between them, intimate and charged. You do not know what it means, she continued, for a ruler to feel seen by something that expects nothing in return. Elias felt heat rise to his face, an inappropriate human reaction he couldn't suppress. I don't expect anything, he said. I didn't come here to change anything. I just showed up. A faint, almost smile touched her lips. That, she said, is precisely how it began last time. The corridor lights dimmed subtly, responding to her elevated emotional state. Elias' implant flickered back to life, just long enough to register one final warning before shutting down completely. Resonance escalating. Proximity threshold exceeded. The Empress noticed the flicker. Her expression sharpened again, this time with concern. You cannot remain near me for long without consequence, she said. The echo responds to proximity, to intention. Elias exhaled slowly. So what happens now? She studied him for a long moment, ancient eyes weighing futures. Now, she said, I decide whether to protect you from what you carry or claim you before the galaxy does. The first consequence came quietly. Elias noticed it only after the Empress turned away, after the corridor lights brightened again and the pressure in the air eased by a fraction. His heartbeat didn't slow the way it should have. It synchronized. Not with the room, with her. He became aware of it the way one becomes aware of a second rhythm layered beneath one's own, subtle, insistent, impossible to ignore once recognized. When she paused, his pulse stuttered. When she inhaled slowly, his lungs followed a half-second later without conscious instruction. Elias stopped walking. So this is what you meant, he said, forcing the words out evenly. The Empress halted as well. She did not turn around immediately. Yes, she replied. This is the echo strengthening. She faced him again, and this time there was no attempt to hide what flickered across her expression. Concern, calculation, something dangerously close to guilt. Your nervous system is responding to mine, she said, not because you are weak, but because the imprint recognizes a familiar signal. I don't like the sound of that, Elias said. I don't like the reality of it, she answered. She lifted her hand again, palm open, deliberately slow, giving him time to pull away if he chose. He didn't. The moment her fingers brushed his wrist, heat surged up his arm, not burning, not painful, but invasive. Intimate images flashed behind his eyes. Fire, stone collapsing. A young Caliph woman coughing in smoke, eyes wide with terror. His hands, older, stronger, bracing a beam, holding it long enough for her to breathe. Elias gasped and staggered back, breaking contact. The vision vanished instantly, leaving him breathless and disoriented. "That's not possible," he said hoarsely. "That wasn't a memory. I didn't remember it, I felt it." The Empress's composure cracked. "That should not be happening yet," she said sharply. "Yet." Elias repeated. She exhaled slowly, clearly recalibrating what she was willing to reveal. "The imprint is not passive," she said. "It is not merely symbolic, it is reactive. The closer you are to the source, the one it was formed around, the more it attempts to resolve." "Resolve into what?" Elias asked, her eyes met his. "Completion." The word sent a chill through him. Footsteps echoed from the far end of the corridor. The Empress stiffened. Three figures emerged from the shadows, Caliph nobles, their robes marked with sigils. Elias' translator flagged as high bloodline, non-imperial. Their expressions were carefully neutral, but the tension in their posture told a different story. "My Empress," one of them said, bowing shallowly. "We felt the shift." "Of course you did," she replied coolly. Their gazes slid to Elias with open curiosity and something sharper beneath it. "So this is the human," another said. "The echo-bearer." Elias' instincts screamed. He didn't know why, but the same certainty that had guided him into the court now urged caution. These beings were not guards. They were not advisors. They were predators who smelled opportunity. "The resonance has begun to destabilize the court's equilibrium," the first noble continued. "Already, factions are recalculating. If this human remains unbound, others will attempt to take him." "Take me how?" Elias asked. The noble smiled thinly. "Politically, biologically, spiritually, the echo you carry is valuable." The Empress stepped forward instantly, placing herself between Elias and them. "He is under my protection." "For now," the noble said, "but protection without claim invites challenge." Elias felt the weight of the word claim settle heavily in his chest. The Empress's jaw tightened. "You presume much." "We remember what happened 3 centuries ago," the third noble said softly. "The chaos that nearly ended your bloodline. If this human truly carries the imprint of your salvation, then leaving him unattached is irresponsible." Elias' pulse spiked. Not fear this time, anger. "I am not a relic," he said, "and I am not a tool." The nobles turned toward him, surprised. The Empress did not. She watched him closely, eyes dark, attentive, as if cataloging every inflection of his defiance. "That," she said quietly, "is exactly what he said." The nobles stiffened. "The one who saved you?" one asked. "Yes." Silence followed. The Empress straightened fully, power rolling off her in palpable waves. "This conversation is over," she declared. "You will withdraw, and you will forget what you think you sensed." They hesitated, then bowed, retreating into the shadows. When they were gone, the Empress sagged slightly, centuries of control momentarily heavy on her shoulders. "They will not stop," she said. "Others will come, scholars, strategists, those who would bind you to themselves to influence me." Elias ran a hand through his hair, still reeling. "So what's the solution?" She looked at him for a long moment. Then she spoke the words that made his chest tighten, not with resonance this time, but with something far more human. "I either hide you," she said, "or I anchor you." "Anchor how?" he asked carefully. Her gaze dropped briefly to his mouth before returning to his eyes. "By formalizing the bond," she said. "By acknowledging the echo publicly. By tying your presence to mine so completely that no one dares touch you without provoking an empire." The choice was taken from him by pain. It began as a tightening behind his eyes, sharp, sudden, disorienting. Elias reached for the wall, fingers scraping smooth obsidian as his vision fractured into overlapping layers. The corridor blurred, then folded inward, like reality briefly forgetting how to remain singular. "Elias." The Empress caught him before he fell. Her arms were strong, impossibly steady. The moment his weight settled against her, the pressure in his skull spiked, then abruptly stabilized. The pain didn't vanish, but it organized itself, pulling into alignment like magnetic filings snapping into place. He gasped, breath shuddering. "Don't," he tried, but the words dissolved into a low, involuntary sound as another surge of sensation rolled through him. This time it wasn't images. It was emotion. Fear that wasn't his. Rage that wasn't his. A terrible, unwavering resolve that was. The Empress froze. Her eyes widened, not in fear, but in shock so raw it stripped away centuries of composure. "You're bleeding through," she whispered. Elias clutched at her robe, not in desperation but instinct, as if some buried part of him understood the rules before his conscious mind could catch up. "I don't know how to stop it." She pressed her forehead briefly to his temple, an intimate, forbidden gesture, and the world clicked. The emotions receded. The pain dulled to a manageable ache. His heartbeat slowed, syncing once more with hers, but this time the rhythm felt mutual. Balanced, she pulled back just enough to look at him. "That should not have worked," she said. Elias managed a weak, breathless smile. "Story of my day." Her lips twitched despite herself. Then the doors at the end of the corridor slammed open. Guards flooded in. Elite this time, armor dark and angular, weapons humming with restrained lethality. Behind them came scholars, advisors, nobles who had not waited to be invited. The resonant spike had been impossible to hide. They stopped short at the sight of the Empress holding the human. Silence fell, sharp and dangerous. The Empress did not release him. Instead, she straightened, lifting Elias with her as if his weight were nothing. Her voice, when she spoke, carried the full authority of the throne. "This echo is destabilizing because it is unresolved," she said, "and it will continue to do so until it is anchored." One of the scholars stepped forward, eyes alight with barely contained awe. "Your Majesty, if the human is already synchronizing at this level, then delay is no longer viable. The imprint is attempting integration." Integration into what? Ambassador Hale demanded from the back of the crowd, pale but furious. The scholar hesitated. "Into her," he said, "or her into him." Elias felt the truth of it resonate deep in his bones. The Empress looked down at him, not as a ruler now, but as a woman who had once been pulled from the ruins of a burning palace by hands she never forgot. "You are not being claimed," she said softly, for his ears alone. "You are being recognized." He met her gaze, pulse steady now certain. "My ancestor didn't ask permission either," he said. "He just acted." Her eyes darkened, something ancient and fiercely alive stirring within them. "Yes," she said, "and history remembers him for it." She turned to the assembly. "Prepare the binding chamber." The reaction was immediate, gasps, protests, urgent warnings. But she silenced them with a single raised hand. "This is not a mating rite," she said coldly. "Nor is it a political annexation. It is a stabilization protocol older than this empire." She looked back at Elias. "It will bind our neural signatures," she continued. "Not ownership. Not obedience, resonance." Elias exhaled slowly. "And if we do?" Her honesty cut deeper than any threat. "Then the echo will tear itself apart," she said, "and you with it." A pause. "Stay with me," she added quietly. "Not as my subject, not as my artifact." Her thumb brushed his wrist again, careful grounding. "As my equal." The words settled into him, heavy and real. Outside the chamber, the binding chamber did not look like a place of ceremony. There were no banners, no symbols of conquest or divine authority, no observers crowding the edges to witness history being made. There was only space. A circular room carved deep into the palace's core, its walls smooth and dark, pulsing faintly with bioluminescent veins that reacted to proximity and emotion alike. The air hummed, not audibly but internally, vibrating just beneath Elias' skin in a way that made his teeth ache and his thoughts sharpen. The doors sealed behind them with a finality that felt deliberate, private, irrevocable. Elias stood at the center, suddenly very aware of how human he was, how fragile, how utterly unprepared for something that predated his species by millennia. The Empress moved opposite him, slow and precise, every step measured. Here, stripped of court and crown, she felt closer, more dangerous somehow. Not because of power, but because nothing stood between them anymore. "This chamber responds to truth," she said. "Not intention, not desire, only what is." That sounds unforgiving, Elias said. It is, she replied. It must be. The floor beneath them, illuminated. Concentric rings of soft light spreading outward from their feet. Elias' implant, long since overwhelmed, remained mercifully silent. Good, he thought. I don't want commentary right now. The Empress removed her outer robes. The gesture was unceremonious, but intimate. Beneath, her form was lean, powerful, marked with faint bioluminescent patterns that shifted slowly with her breath. They were not decorative. Elias understood that instinctively. They were biological interfaces, paths of neural resonance visible on the skin. She noticed his attention. This is where the echo will map, she said. Visual alignment improves stability. Of course it does, Elias muttered. She stepped closer. The pressure in his chest returned, not painful, not overwhelming, but focused, like standing at the center of a storm that had finally decided where to turn. Before we begin, she said, you must understand something. He met her gaze. This bond does not erase you, she continued. It does not overwrite your will, but it will make you visible to me, in ways no one has ever been allowed. Elias' throat tightened, and you to me. A pause. Yes, she said quietly. That is the risk I am taking. The honesty of it struck harder than any declaration. Then we're even, he said. A faint smile curved her lips. She raised her hands, not to touch him yet, but close enough that the air between them shimmered faintly. When the echo completes, she said, you may feel things that are not yours, memories, instincts, desires. Desires, Elias echoed, her eyes darkened. This is not a sterile process, she said. Your ancestor did not save me without wanting to. That intent is part of what endured. The words sent a shiver through him, not fear, but something warmer, deeper. Tell me to stop, she said softly, and I will. Elias searched himself. The fear was there, so was uncertainty, but beneath both lay the same certainty that had followed him since the moment he entered her court. Stay. Don't stop, he said. The chamber responded instantly. Light surged up the walls, flowing inward toward them. The air thickened, charged with energy that made Elias' vision blur at the edges. The Empress stepped into his space and placed her hands flat against his chest. This time he didn't resist. The connection slammed into place, not gently, not slowly. Elias cried out as sensation tore through him. Heat, pressure, emotion folding into emotion until he couldn't tell where he ended and she began. He felt her shock, her relief, her ancient loneliness like it had been carved into his own bones. And she gasped. Her hands tightened, fingers digging into his uniform as images flooded her mind. A human man in firelight. Strong hands bracing fallen stone. A decision made in a heartbeat without thought of reward or survival, him. Not Elias, but of him. The echo resolved. The chamber lights flared, then settled into a steady glow. Elias sagged forward, breath ragged. The Empress caught him easily, holding him upright, forehead resting against his. For a long moment neither spoke. When she finally pulled back, her expression had changed. Not softened, clarified. It is done, she said. Elias swallowed. Am I still me? Her thumb brushed his cheek, reverent. Yes, she said, and now I know you. Something shifted inside him, not loss but grounding. The echo no longer strained, it fit. Outside the chamber, alarms began to sound, not in warning but in acknowledgement. The bond had been registered. The galaxy would know. The Empress straightened, power settling back into her posture. But when she looked at Elias again, it was no longer as a ruler assessing a variable. It was as someone who had chosen. Rest, she said. You will need strength for what comes next. What comes next? Elias asked. Her gaze turned toward the sealed doors. Now, she said, we see who dares challenge what has been bound. And for the first time since destiny, Elias woke to silence. Not the sterile quiet of a medical bay, nor the tense stillness of the Obsidian Court, but something deeper, weighted, deliberate. The kind of silence that existed only in places built to hold secrets. He lay on a surface that adjusted subtly beneath his weight, neither soft nor rigid, responding to his breathing as if listening. Light filtered from nowhere in particular, a dim silver glow that pulsed in slow, steady rhythm. Not unlike a heartbeat, not his. He sat up slowly. The echo did not surge. That was the first thing he noticed. No pressure behind his eyes, no destabilizing pull in his chest, no sense of being dragged toward something unfinished. Instead, there was presence, a quiet awareness at the edge of his perception, warm and constant, like standing near a fire without being burned. You are awake. The voice was not spoken aloud. Elias inhaled sharply, then steadied himself. I am, he replied, not out loud but inward instinctively. A pause, good. The sensation shifted. Approval, relief, restrained satisfaction. He realized with a strange calm that the connection no longer required proximity. The echo had not bound him asterisk to asterisk her. It had aligned him with asterisk her. The doors opened soundlessly. The Empress entered alone. She wore no crown, no ceremonial robes, only a simple garment that traced the lines of her form without artifice. The bioluminescent markings along her skin glowed faintly, steady now, no longer fluctuating. She stopped a few steps away. For the first time since they met, there was no overwhelming pressure between them, just gravity. Your neural activity stabilized faster than projected, she said. That surprised the scholars. Elias smiled faintly. I've always been good at adapting. Her eyes softened not with surprise but recognition. You are quieter now, she observed. So are you, he replied. She considered that. Yes, she said, I am. She moved closer, unhurried, studying him not as an anomaly, but as a presence she had already accounted for, integrated into the architecture of her world. The court is divided, she continued. Some fear you. Others wish to elevate you beyond reason. A few already plan how to use what you represent. And you, Elias asked. She met his gaze steadily. I will not allow you to become a symbol, she said. Symbols are consumed. Something in her tone, protective, resolute, sent a quiet warmth through his chest. What am I then? He asked. She reached out, not touching this time, simply close enough that he felt her there. You are an answer, she said, to a question I have carried since the palace fell. Her voice lowered, and you are a choice. The weight of that settled between them, not heavy but real. I won't cage you, she said, nor will I hide you. The bond does not grant me ownership. I know, Elias said, a pause. But it does mean, she continued, that when the galaxy looks at you, it will see asterisk me asterisk. And when it looks at me, it will see me, Elias finished quietly. Her lips curved just slightly. Yes. Outside the chamber, the palace stirred. Alliances shifting, calculations rewriting themselves in real time. Messages were already moving across systems, whispers becoming strategy. But here, in this moment, there was no urgency, only clarity. You may leave, she said, if you choose. The offer was genuine. Elias felt it in the absence of pressure, in the open space she left around the words. He thought of Doc Ring Sea of manifests, of orderly systems that made sense. Then he thought of firelight, of steady hands, of a choice made without expectation of reward. I won't run from what I carry, he said, and I won't pretend this didn't change me. He looked at her, but I won't stay because I'm bound. Her gaze sharpened, not defensively but attentively. I'll stay, he finished, because I want to see what we become when echoes stop repeating and start choosing. For a long moment, the Empress of Caliph said nothing. Then she inclined her head, not in command, not in claim, in respect. Then stand with me, she said. Not behind, not beneath. She extended her hand. Elias took it. Outside, the galaxy would argue over what he was: artifact, threat, miracle, leverage. Inside the palace, older than human history, something far quieter had taken shape. Not destiny, not inheritance, but two beings separated by centuries and species, choosing, deliberately, to let the future be something new. And for the first time since the echo had awakened, it did not hum with inevitability. It rested, complete. Standing beside her in the Obsidian Court felt different now. Not heavier, clearer. The chamber was fuller than it had been before. Delegations returned, advisors repositioned, guards arranged with deliberate symmetry, but the tension had shifted. Where earlier there had been shock and hunger, now there was caution. Calculation layered over restraint. They all felt it. The bond did not announce itself with light or sound. It didn't need to. It existed in the way the Empress's presence no longer pressed outward like a weapon, but held steady like an anchored star. It existed in the way Elias' thoughts stayed his own, even as awareness of her moved quietly alongside them. Not intrusion, alignment. When the Empress took her seat, she did not gesture for Elias to stand apart. He remained at her side. That alone rewrote half the equations in the room. A Valoran envoy inclined their metallic head, skin shifting through hues. Elias' translator tagged as measured respect. A Krian warlord, Stormform barely contained, lowered its internal pressure by a fraction. The Outer Rim delegates leaned together, whispering rapidly. Humans were no longer an afterthought, but Elias felt no surge of triumph, only responsibility. "This assembly will proceed," the Empress said, voice carrying easily. "With one clarification." Her gaze swept the chamber. "The human beside me is not a symbol of Caliph dominion," she continued, "nor is he an instrument of Terran leverage. He is not an anomaly to be dissected, nor a resource to be claimed. A pause, he is here because he chose to be." The words struck harder than any declaration of conquest. Elias felt it ripple outward, not as command but as precedent. Choice, acknowledged at this scale, was destabilizing in ways no empire liked to admit. A scholar stepped forward, courage overriding caution. "Your Majesty," they said carefully. The resonance now stabilized. "What does it mean, strategically?" The Empress's eyes did not leave Elias when she answered. "It means," she said, "that Caliph will no longer mistake compassion for weakness." A murmur swept the room. "And it means," she added, "that humanity's presence among the stars will no longer be evaluated solely by what it can extract, trade, or threaten." Her gaze finally returned to the assembly. "It will be evaluated by what it chooses to protect." Silence followed, not empty but considering. Elias felt something shift inside him, not the echo but himself. The weight of being seen not as inherited courage, not as ancestral residue, but as a living continuation who still had to decide. He leaned slightly toward her, voice low. "You're making enemies." "Yes," she replied without hesitation, "but not the dangerous kind." The session continued, agreements revised, language softened, timelines redrawn. But Elias understood that the true change had already occurred before a single clause was amended. Power had been reframed. When the final delegate departed and the court emptied once more, the Empress remained seated for a long moment, still contemplative. "You will be watched," she said at last. "Questioned, tested." "I know," Elias replied. "Some will try to provoke you," she continued. "Others will try to tempt you. A few will attempt to isolate you from me." He glanced at her. "Will it work?" Her lips curved faintly. "They misunderstand the bond," she said. "It does not compel loyalty." She looked at him then, really looked. "It invites honesty." Elias nodded slowly. "Then I'll disappoint them." A quiet sound escaped her, half amusement, half something warmer. They walked together toward the private corridors, not touching, not needing to. The palace lights adjusted to their pace, responding not to hierarchy, but to presence. At a junction where their paths could diverge, she stopped. "There will be moments," she said carefully, "when this becomes difficult, when the echo stirs, when memory and instinct blur." "And when it does?" Elias asked. Her answer was immediate. "We speak," she said. "We choose again." The simplicity of it grounded him more than any oath could have. Outside the palace, stars burned indifferent and ancient, watching alliances form and dissolve as they always had. Inside, something rarer had taken root. Not a legend, not a prophecy, but a living bond. The first challenge came without ceremony. No declarations, no assassins in shadow. No dramatic betrayal announced beneath vaulted ceilings. It arrived as an invitation. Elias found it waiting for him in the quiet hours before the palace woke fully, projected softly into the air beside his quarters, its language precise, respectful, and unmistakably calculated. A private colloquium, it read, convened by the Triune Compact. Purpose, clarification of status, intent, and future alignment. He exhaled slowly. They're fast, he murmured. They are afraid, her presence replied, not as words but as understanding. The bond had settled into something subtle now, more like shared weather than shared thought. Fear accelerates intelligence. Elias dressed without ceremony. No uniform this time. No insignia. Just neutral fabric, deliberately unremarkable. If they were going to dissect him, he would not give them easy symbols to pin down. The colloquium chamber was smaller than the Obsidian Court, but no less deliberate. 3 representatives waited, each from a power that mattered. A Valoran diplomat, skin gleaming with controlled chromatic neutrality. A Nethan strategist, eyes too sharp to belong to a species that claimed pacifism. And a Caliph noble, high bloodline, distant relation to the throne. The door sealed behind him. Lieutenant Rourke, the Valoran said smoothly. Or do you prefer another title now? Elias smiled faintly. Elias Works. The Nethan's mouth curved in something like approval. You are unexpected, the Caliph noble said. Your presence has altered several long-standing projections. That happens when people are treated like variables instead of individuals, Elias replied. A pause, interesting pause. You are aware, the Valoran continued, that your bond with the Empress creates asymmetry. Power gravitates toward resonance. I'm aware, Elias said. I'm also aware that none of you invited me here out of curiosity. The Nethan leaned forward slightly. We want to know what you intend to do with this influence. Elias considered the question carefully. He felt her awareness touch the edge of his, present, attentive but not steering. Good. I don't intend to use it, he said at last. The Caliph noble's ears flicked sharply. That is not an answer. It is, Elias said. You're just not used to it. He met their gazes one by one. My ancestor didn't save the Empress to gain leverage, he continued. I didn't bind with her to reshape the galaxy. I'm not here to balance your equations. So you deny responsibility? The Valoran asked. No, Elias replied. I accept it. That landed harder. Responsibility, he went on, means knowing when not to act. It means understanding that power used reflexively becomes control. And control is what nearly destroyed her empire 3 centuries ago. Silence, the Caliph noble shifted uncomfortably. You speak boldly, the Nethan said. For someone without fleets. Elias nodded. True, but I stand beside someone who knows exactly what unchecked fear does to a civilization, and she listens when I speak. That finally unsettled them. The Valoran skin shifted briefly, involuntarily into a hue Elias translator tagged as strategic uncertainty. This bond, the diplomat said slowly, may prove inconvenient. Elias shrugged. Truth often is. When the meeting ended, none of them had what they came for, which meant he had done it right. That night, Elias stood on a balcony overlooking the inner gardens, bioluminescent flora casting soft light across water that flowed in impossible geometries. The palace breathed around him, ancient and aware. She joined him without announcement. They tested you, she said. Yes, he replied, and they'll do it again. Her gaze followed the water's path. You did not posture, you did not threaten. I'm bad at both, Elias said. She turned toward him. You were steady. He felt the echo stir, not loudly, not insistently, just enough to remind him it existed. So were you, he said. You didn't intervene. I wanted to, she admitted. He smiled. I know. They stood in silence for a while, 2 figures outlined against a future no one else could quite predict. You realize, she said eventually, that you are changing how they see humanity. Elias considered that. I hope, he said, I'm changing how they see choice. Her hand brushed his light, deliberate. The contact carried no surge this time, only warmth. Beyond the palace walls, the galaxy continued its endless calculations. Alliances shifting, threats forming, histories repeating. But somewhere in the quiet space between an ancient ruler and a human who refused to become a legend, a different pattern had begun to